Imagine this. One of the greatest defenders and endgame maestros of the 21st century, Magnus Carlsen, rating 2,882, faces off against the Romantic-era attacking genius, Paul Morphy, rated 2,600, in an epic fantasy matchup on chess.com. Morphy brings fireworks, and Magnus brings a fire extinguisher. Let's dive into this modern versus classic showdown, one move at a time. Pawn to d4. Magnus opens with his trusted queen's pawn. Solid, strategic, aiming to control the center and develop smoothly. Pawn to e6. Morphy chooses a flexible setup. The French defense ideas could be in the air, or he may transpose. Already a little twist from the usual 1e5 we associate with him. Pawn to c4. Magnus grabs more central space. We're heading into Queen's Gambit territory. Pawn to d5. Morphy accepts the challenge. We are officially in the Queen's Gambit decline, a timeless battleground of control and counterattack. Knight to c3. Developing the knight and reinforcing the center. Textbook classical chess from Magnus. Knight to f6. Morphy fights for e4 and prepares to castle. Both sides are following opening principles. Pawn takes pawn on d5. Magnus enters the exchange variation. He's simplifying early, a known Magnus strategy, reducing tension to create long-term structural imbalances. Pawn takes d5. Morphy recaptures naturally. Now we have a symmetrical pawn structure. But as we'll see, there's nothing equal about what's to come. Bishop to g5. Here comes the Cambridge Spring system flavor, pinning the knight, putting pressure on f6. Bishop to b4. Morphy counterpins. Now both knights are under pressure. We're in sharp double-edged territory. Pawn to e3. Magnus calmly supports his center and opens a line for his dark-squared bishop. Pawn to c6. Morphy strengthens the d5 pawn and prepares to develop his queen's knight. Solid and flexible. Bishop to d3. A natural developing move, eyeing the king side. Magnus is preparing for action there. Castles kingside. Morphy brings his king to safety, but it's not going to stay safe for long. Knight to f3. White continues clean development. Now all minor pieces are ready to play. Pawn to h6. Morphy starts a classic pawn storm on the king side. He wants to challenge the bishop on g5, a bit provocative. Bishop to h4. Magnus retreats, keeping the pin and inviting g5. He's almost daring Morphy to overextend. Pawn to g5. Whoa! Morphy obliges. This is classic 1800s aggression, but it loosens his king side. A risky decision. Bishop to g3, retreating with tempo. The bishop stays active and might return to f4 or h2 depending on need. Knight to e4. Morphy jumps into the center with a knight, aggressive and thematic. He's aiming to dominate, castles kingside. Magnus is unfazed. He castles into the storm, confident he can neutralize the attack or counter. Bishop to f5. Morphy develops with pressure. He's eyeing g3 and possibly lining up for a battery. Knight captures knight on e4. Magnus says, enough, and trades the aggressor. Bishop captures e4. Morphy recaptures, keeping his pieces centralized, but now he's running out of fuel for the attack. Bishop captures e4. Simplification continues. Magnus is happy to trade pieces and eliminate Morphy's activity. Pawn to dxe4. Now the center has a new pawn island, but Morphy's position starts to look a bit brittle. Knight to e5. Bold. Magnus immediately puts pressure on the weakened e4 pawn and starts targeting f7 indirectly. Knight to d7. Morphy adds defense, but it's a bit passive. His pieces are retreating while Magnus is advancing. Queen to h5. Now it's heating up. The queen eyes h6 and puts pressure on the light squares. The kingside tension is rising. Knight captures e5. Morphy trades again, but this lets Magnus bring more pressure. Pawn captures e5. The e-file is opening. Magnus now has a free hand on the king side. This position favors him more and more. King to g7. An awkward move. The king steps out of the pin, but it's exposed. A sign Morphy is uncomfortable. Queen to g4. Boom! Magnus lines up for a queen invasion. He's circling the king like a shark smelling blood. Queen to a7. Morphy tries to trade queens. A desperate attempt to kill the attack. Queen captures e4. Magnus says, "Sure, let's simplify, but only on my terms." Now he owns the center too. Rook to d8. Morphy develops his last rook, but it's too slow. His king is still vulnerable. Rook to d1. Magnus doubles pressure down the center. All of his pieces are active. The initiative is his. Pawn to h5. Morphy pushes his h-pawn, trying to stir counterplay, but it might just open more targets. Pawn to h4. Magnus locks things down. No counterplay allowed. Cold-blooded precision. Pawn to a5. Morphy switches wings, but it's a distraction. His king is the one under fire. Pawn to a3. Magnus calmly counters. He's saying, "I see everything." Bishop to d2. Morphy shifts his bishop, a defensive maneuver, passive but necessary. Queen to c2. A powerful retreat. Magnus is rerouting his queen to new open files. Pressure keeps building. Queen to d7. Morphy centralizes, but too many holes remain. Pawn to e6. This is it. The pawn break. Magnus sacrifices a pawn to rip open the king. The attack begins. Queen to d3. Morphy tries to hold on, but it's like patching a dam with chewing gum. Bishop to e5+. A beautiful intermezzo. Magnus checks, grabbing control of the dark squares. King to g8. The king tucks back in, but now it's truly cornered. Rook captures d2. Magnus completes the sacrifice. And now, doubles rooks against a trapped king. Queen captures c2. Morphy desperately grabs material, but it's too late. Rook captures c2. Now white's rooks dominate the open files. The ending is near. Pawn to fxe6. Morphy accepts the sacrifice, but it only opens more files for Magnus to attack through. Pawn to h5. A quiet-looking move, but deadly. Magnus is planning to pry open the king side completely. King to h7. Morphy steps away, but there's no safety. The storm is here. Pawn to f4. The steamroller is in motion. Magnus prepares to launch. King to g6. Morphy walks into the fire. This is insane bravery, or pure desperation. Rook to c5. Magnus quietly maneuvers. All pieces are perfectly coordinated. Rook to d3. Morphy activates a rook, maybe too late. The king is gasping for air on g6. Morphy's pieces are scattered, and Magnus is closing in like a python. King to f2. Magnus calmly brings his king up. Yes, even in attack, his endgame instincts are flawless. Pawn to a4. Morphy tries one last distraction on the queen side, a pawn push. But this is like rearranging chairs on the Titanic. King to f3. Magnus continues the majestic king walk. He's in total control. There is no rush. Rook to f7. Morphy places his rook defensively, but it's too little, too late. The coordination just isn't there. Rook to h1. This is beautiful. Magnus sets up for a rook swing via h1. He's going for the classic Alekine's gun on the h-file. Rook to d2. Morphy grabs a second rank post, but it's not doing anything constructive. Bishop to c3. Magnus prepares to unleash his light-squared bishop, the final piece entering the battle. Rook to d5. Morphy blocks and trades, desperately trying to simplify. Rook captures d5. Clean and clinical. Magnus trades and keeps pressure. Pawn captures d5. Morphy recaptures, but now his structure collapses. Bishop to f6. Here it comes. Bishop to f6. The point of it all. The rook on f7 is pinned, the king is boxed in. It's a masterpiece in the making. Pawn to b5. Morphy continues the meaningless queenside march. He's completely lost. This is desperation. Pawn to g4. Magnus breaks through. He's tearing open the kingside defenses. Morphy is defenseless. Pawn captures g4 plus. Morphy accepts the gift, but now his king is even more exposed. King captures g4. Unbelievable. The king marches up to g4 and is totally safe. What was once a piece of danger is now a weapon. Poetry in motion. Rook to f8. Morphy tries one last realignment, but everything is falling apart. Pawn to f5 plus. Magnus begins the final hunt. This is it. The king has nowhere to run. King to f7. Morphy steps back. A forced move. His fate is sealed. Rook to h7 plus. Boom! The rook lands on h7 with check. The death blow is coming. King to e8. Morphy has no choice. He retreats, but the walls are closing in. Rook to c7. Magnus doubles on the 7th rank. Textbook conversion. It's now a matter of execution. Pawn to b4. Morphy continues to push, but nobody's buying it. Rook to e7 plus. Magnus hits with tempo again, cutting off the king. King to d8. Morphy shuffles. There's no hiding. Rook to a 7 plus. A beautiful dance. Magnus sets up the final net. No escape now. King to e8. Morphy returns, cornered and out of hope. Rook captures a 4. Magnus grabs a pawn, slowly dismantling everything. Rook to f7. Morphy reroutes, but it's all futile. Rook to a 8 plus. Yet another check. The final curtain is falling. King to d7. Morphy is running. But where? Pawn to g6. Magnus tears open the last files. This is art, plain and simple. Rook captures f6. Morphy tries to survive by giving up material. Pawn captures g7. Now a second queen is coming. This is glorious. Pawn to c5. Morphy pushes one last pawn. A whisper of counterplay, but too slow. Pawn promotes to queen. g8 equals q. A new queen. Magnus brings in reinforcements. The final phase begins. Pawn to cxb4. Morphy captures, but it's irrelevant. Queen captures pawn on d5 plus. Check. Magnus uses the new queen to drive the king into the kill zone. King to c7. Only legal move. The final box, rook to a 7 plus. Check again. The pieces work in total harmony. A symphony of domination. King to b6. The king is hiding, but only for a moment longer. Rook to b7 plus. Now it's unavoidable. The king is walking the plank. King to a 6. Only move. The final step before doom. Queen to b5. Checkmate! And that's it! A stunning, clean, beautiful checkmate by Magnus Carlsen. The king is trapped in a box of his own pieces. Morphy's romantic attack fizzled out, and Magnus converted with terrifying precision.